From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. Putin and Trump, when cowards play with matches. Trump, Putin, and the sparks that could set the world on fire. Published September 26, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
When cowards play with matches, the world burns. Trump shakes the hand of Putin, deals in shadows the truth undone. Drones in the sky, borders trembling, wars ignite when the cowards run. When cowards play with matches, the flames consume us all. History won't forgive them. Trump and Putin let the empire fall. Promises broken, patriots withheld, nations betrayed while the weak are compelled. From Ukraine's night to NATO's skies, the world sees through their poison lies. When cowards play with matches, the fire spreads like sin. History writes in ashes. Trump and Putin will not win. History will not forgive.
The world has often seen great wars ignited not by inevitability, but by weakness, hesitation, and betrayal. Cowards playing with matches. History shows that one of the biggest risk factors for war is an autocratic leader who fears for his own future, which is why the kind of pathetic incoherence we saw at the United Nations this week should concern us all. This week's news brings some alarming data points. After 4 different Danish airports were buzzed by what many assume to be Russian drones, Danes are uncertain, a French airport was hit yesterday, and a Norwegian airport was shut down by drones earlier this week. The U.S. Navy fired Trident II D5 ballistic missiles from the coast of Florida, lighting up the sky as they were testing devices that could carry thermonuclear bombs deep into Russia. A massive U.S. Navy presence in the Caribbean and off the coast of Venezuela was just this week joined by F-35s and Reaper drones, as Trump has blown 3 Venezuela boats out of the water without congressional authorization. In an absolutely unprecedented move, Pete, quote, Kager, end quote, Hegseth, has ordered all the U.S. military's flag officers and their staffs to come to Virginia for a meeting with an unknown agenda. This is not normal military procedure. It has the stench of authoritarian consolidations. The kind of maneuver history has shown us precedes purges, coups, and crackdowns. Russia is experiencing a nationwide fuel shortage, also in Russia-occupied Crimea, as a result of Ukrainian drones taking out refineries and depots across the nation. It's so bad, the Kremlin has banned fuel exports until the end of the year. The nation's economy is teetering, and Putin is apparently in political trouble. Taiwan's Deputy Foreign Minister Wu Chi-chung warns, quote, China is preparing to invade Taiwan, end quote. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, just said, quote, NATO and the European Union want to declare, in fact, have already declared, a real war on my country and are directly participating in it, end quote. NATO notified Russia they may shoot down planes that invade NATO airspace, and Russia replied that, quote, would be war, end quote. As Russian jets cross NATO skies and intelligence warns of an impending strike, while Trump, desperate for diversion from the Epstein-Trump sex scandal and a collapsing economy, appears to be trying to provoke a war with Venezuela. The question grows louder. Are we watching the sparks of a new global conflict? And is the dangerous bond between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump the match that could light the fuse of World War III? Remember back in July when Trump told NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte during a visit to the Oval Office that if Europe would pay for the anti-missile defense systems Ukraine desperately needs, he'd see to it that they were shipped over there promptly. President Zelensky tweeted, quote, I am grateful to our team and to the United States, Germany, and Norway for preparing a new decision on Patriots for Ukraine, end quote. Rudd coordinated with Germany and Norway, and later other NATO countries, to raise the billions necessary to pay for the systems to replenish stocks held by European nations, particularly France, Germany, and Denmark, that those countries are supplying to Ukraine. The replacement should have arrived in Europe by now, a continent that's increasingly on edge as Putin keeps flying MiGs over former Soviet client states in the Baltics. As they supply Ukraine, which is suffering under unprecedented attacks with hundreds of missiles and drones every night, Europe's own stockpiles that could be used to deter Russian aggression are vanishing. Between that Oval Office meeting and now, however, Trump has had his infamous red carpet meeting with Putin in Alaska and apparently got different orders from his self-described friend and probable mentor. As Vivian Salama reports for The Atlantic, there's been a sudden change in the Trump administration's position with regard to providing NATO or EU countries with defensive weaponry to replace what they've given to Ukraine. Quote, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Elbridge Colby, said that he didn't believe in the value of certain military foreign sales, according to two administration officials with knowledge of the discussion, end quote. Adding to European concerns, news broke last week that a Russian major general who defected claims Putin is planning an full-on invasion of both Ukraine and parts of the Baltic states, all NATO members, quote, before Christmas, end quote. Moscow is preparing a, quote, gray zone, end quote, attack on Poland before Christmas, a senior Russian military official has revealed. The warning sent through an Eastern European ally during London's DSEI arms fair last week has triggered urgent discussions in the UK and US about the risk of a deniable strike aimed at fracturing NATO, end quote. Poland, Romania, and Estonia have all seen Russian MiGs violate their airspace in the past 2 weeks, scrambling NATO jets as Poland and Estonia have invoked NATO's Article 4 process to stand up to potential aggression. It appears to me, just my opinion, that when Putin met with Trump in Alaska, either he ordered Trump to back away from Ukraine and NATO, or simply took the measure of the man and concluded he could launch an invasion of the Baltics with a low probability that the United States, under the convicted felon, would respond militarily. Trump's least recent blocking of Patriot systems to Europe suggests the former rather than the latter. Europe is taking this threat seriously. Great Britain this past week dispatched Royal Air Force jets to Poland with backup from Voyager tankers They joined German, French, Swedish, and Danish jets that began patrolling the eastern flank of the Baltic nations after the first Polish incursions. Donald Tusk, Poland's prime minister, warned that his nation, and implicitly the region, is now closer to military conflict than any time since the Second World War, end quote. The UK's OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Ambassador Neil Holland was explicit that these were not accidental incursions into NATO airspace. Quote, either Russia has deployed systems it cannot control, or it is provoking us deliberately, end quote. According to the Express reporting, British intelligence isn't expecting a full-on invasion of Eastern Europe, but instead, at least initially, the same sort of, quote, deniable, end quote, pinpoint attacks Putin has used to precede his single larger assaults on other nations, including Georgia and Ukraine. One UK intelligence official said, quote, there's no suggestion of a full-scale invasion, but a calibrated strike, something deniable, something confusing, is exactly how Russia has operated in the past, end quote. He added, quote, they're probing NATO. If they can strike Poland and NATO flinches, even slightly, it undermines the whole alliance, end quote. At the same time, Russia has reportedly launched a full-scale, quote, coordinated information warfare, end quote, assault in Finland via the internet and social media. Finland shares a 833-mile-long border with Russia, which, as the USSR, has invaded that nation twice in modern times, once in 1939 and again in 1941. Marco Giannagalli, defense and diplomatic editor for Express, pointed out, quote, Western officials fear the disinformation campaign is intended to soften the ground for further provocations along the Gulf of Finland, end quote. Putin's apparently taking Trump's taco, Trump always chickens out, end quote, label, to heart. Tragically, the entire world may soon see the consequence of a blustering, incompetent, race deportation-obsessed, apparently terrified of Putin president who's surrounded himself with people whose singular quality is not competence but loyalty and a willingness to break tradition and the law on the boss's behalf. History will not forgive miscalculation at this scale. With Europe bracing for attack, NATO stockpiles running dry, Trump near provoking war with Venezuela, and Putin in deep trouble at home, probing for weakness, the world stands at a perilous crossroads. The only question now is whether this moment will be remembered as the turning point that stopped another world war, or the disaster when Putin and Trump together opened the gates to it.